Whilst man, in its first physical condition, is only passively affected by the world of sense, he is still entirely identified with it, and for this reason, the external world, as yet, has no objective existence for him. When he begins in his ascetic state of mind to regard the world objectively, then only is his personality severed from it, and the world appears to him an objective reality, for the simple reason that he has ceased to form an identical portion of it. That which connects man with the surrounding universe is the power of reflective contemplation, whereas desire seizes at once its object. Reflection removes it to a distance and renders it inalienably her own by saving it from the greed of passion. The necessity of sense, which he obeyed during the period of mere sensations, lessens during the period of reflection. The senses are for the time in abeyance, even ever fleeting time stands still, whilst the scattered rays of consciousness are gathered and shape themselves. An image of the infinite is reflected upon the perishable ground. As soon as light dawns in man, there is no longer a night outside of him. As soon as there is peace within him, the storm lulls throughout the universe, and the contending forces of nature find rest within prescribed limits. Hence we cannot wonder if ancient traditions allude to these great changes in the inner man as to a revolution in surrounding nature, and symbolize thought triumphing over the laws of time by the figure of Zeus, which terminates the reign of Saturn. As long as man derives sensations from a contact with nature, he is her slave, but as soon as he begins to reflect upon her objects and laws, he becomes her lawgiver. Nature, which previously ruled him as a power, now expands before him as an object. What is objective to him can have no power over him, for in order to become objective, it has to experience his own power. As far and as long as he impresses a form upon matter, he cannot be injured by its effect, for a spirit can only be injured by that which deprives it of its freedom, whereas he proves his own freedom by giving a form to the formless, where the mass rules heavily and without shape, and its undefined outlines are forever fluctuating between uncertain boundaries. Fear takes up its abode, but man rises above any natural terror as soon as he knows how to mold it and transform it into an object of his art. As soon as he upholds his independence towards phenomenal natures, he maintains his dignity toward her as a thing of power, and with a noble freedom he rises against his gods. They throw aside the mask with which they had kept him in awe during his infancy, and to his surprise, his mind perceives the reflection of his own image, the divine monster of the Oriental, which roams about, changing the world with the blind force of a beast of prey, dwindles to the charming outline of humanity in Greek fable. The empire of the Titans is crushed, the boundless force is tamed by infinite form. But whilst I have been merely searching for an issue from the material world and a passage into the world of mind, the bold flight of my imagination has already taken me into the very midst of the latter world, the beauty of which we are in search we have left behind by passing from the life of mere sensations to the pure form and to the pure object. Such a leap exceeds the condition of human nature. In order to keep pace with the latter, we must return to the world of sense. Beauty is indeed the sphere of unfettered contemplation and reflection. Beauty conducts us into the world of ideas, without, however, taking us from the world of sense. as occurs when a truth is perceived and acknowledged. This is the pure product of a process of abstraction from everything material and accidental, a pure object free from every subjective barrier, pure state of self-activity without any admixture of passive sensations. There is indeed a way back to sensation from the highest abstraction, for thought teaches the inner sensation, and the idea of logical or moral unity passes into a sensation of sensual accord. But if we delight in knowledge, we separate very accurately our own conceptions from our sensations. We look upon the latter as something accidental, which might have been omitted without the knowledge being impaired thereby, without truth being less true. It would, however, be a vain attempt to suppress this connection of the faculty of feeling with the idea of beauty. Consequently, we shall not succeed in representing to ourselves one as the effect of the other, but we must look upon them both together and reciprocally as cause and effect. In the pleasure which we derive from knowledge, we readily distinguish the passage from active to the passive state, and we clearly perceive that the first ends when the second begins. On the contrary, from the pleasure which we take in beauty, this transition from the active to the passive is not perceivable, and reflection is so intimately blended with feeling that we believe we feel the form immediately. Beauty is then an object to us, it is true, because reflection is the condition of the feeling which we have of it, but it is also a state of our personality, our ego, because the feeling is the condition of the idea we conceive of it. Beauty is therefore doubtless form, because we contemplate it, but it is equally life, because we feel it. In a word, it is at once our state and our act, and precisely because it is at the same time both a state and an act, it triumphantly proves to us that the passive does not exclude the active, neither matter nor form, neither the finite nor the infinite, and that, consequently, the physical dependence to which man is necessarily devoted does not in any way destroy his moral liberty. This is the proof of beauty, and I ought to add that this alone can prove it. In fact, as in the possession of truth or of logical unity, feeling is not necessarily one with the thought, but follows it accidentally. It is a fact which only proves that a sensitive nature can succeed a rational nature, and vice versa. Not that they coexist, that they exercise a reciprocal action one over the other, and lastly, that they ought to be united in an absolute and necessary manner. From this exclusion of feeling, as long as there is thought, and of thought, so long as there is feeling, we should on the contrary conclude that the two natures are incompatible, so that in order to demonstrate that pure reason is to be realized in humanity, the best proof given by the analysis is that this realization is demanded. But as in the realization of beauty or of aesthetic unity, there is a real union, mutual substitution of matter and of form, of passive and of active. By this alone is proved the compatibility of the two natures, the possible realization of the infinite in the finite, and consequently also the possibility of the most sublime humanity. Henceforth, we need no longer be embarrassed to find a transition from dependent feeling to moral liberty, because beauty reveals to us the fact that they can perfectly coexist, and that to show himself a spirit, man need not escape from matter. But if on one side he is free, even in his relation, with the visible world, as the fact of beauty teaches. And if on the other side freedom is something absolute and supersensuous, as this idea necessarily implies, the question is no longer how a man succeeds in raising himself from the finite to the absolute, and opposing himself in his thought and will to sensuality, as this has already been produced in the fact of beauty. In a word, we have no longer to ask how he passes from virtue to truth, which is already included in the former, but how he opens a way for himself from vulgar reality to aesthetic reality, and from the ordinary feelings of life to the perception of the beautiful.